so you want to get better at street photography. But to begin with, what even is good street photography? So what would that look like to you? In this video, I'm going to share with you 6 major things that were absolutely pivotal in terms of accelerating my growth as a street photographer based on some of the most fatal mistakes that I've made throughout my journey shooting streets. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. I cannot emphasize more how important it is to really diversify your sources of inspiration, because what you expose your subconsciousness to is going to determine where you begin. Eventually that's going to have an influence over what street photography means to you, the kind of look that you want to go for, the types of gear upgrades that you're gonna have to make, etc. So this sounds rather paradoxical, but ideally inspiration should be a result of deliberate curation of your creative influences. Obviously, you wouldn't want to be relying on one sole source of inspiration, which I regrettably did for many years straight. If you do that, you're going to limit yourself as to the potential creative path, and that's going to hammer your growth substantially as a creative. So let me point you to a few helpful resources that I think are going to benefit you in terms of building up your inspiration library. This is an absolute no-brainer, but Instagram is an amazing place to start building up your wealth of sources. It is the most accessible to the most amount of people, and many working photographers today from all parts of the world are putting up their recent works on their feed and refreshing it regularly. And the things being talked about, the discussions that they initiate are probably going to be more relatable to you in a sense that you are both photographing around the same time and space. So the things that you learn from those types of sources are going to be more readily applicable to your own work. But in case you're not already aware, there is actually a massive pitfall with Instagram in a sense that there are a few specific sets of aesthetics that the users tend to favor. And to be completely honest with you, I was guilty of blindly chasing and trying to mimic this Instagrammable look on my feed, and that's all I have been doing in my photography for a few years, which absolutely stagnated my growth in my street photography. Things that you see on Instagram is far from inaccurate, reliable representation of what street photography can potentially be about. Another source I would definitely recommend that you check out is Magnum Photos. Magnum Photos is one of the world's largest and most renowned photo agencies, which represent photographers with some of the most groundbreaking and impactful works that have been done mostly from the 20th century onwards. The way I look at these works are very different from how I consume the instant content on Instagram, in a sense that it teaches me about the history of photography, which then puts things into perspective for me. I have hammered on this for many times in my previous videos, but I think it's really important if you ever want to, sort out a direction for your street photography, to actually learn about first what came before you. So what have already been done? If you don't have any idea, Magnum is a great place to begin with. If you manage to find a few photographers whose work that you really resonate with, then this leads us to the next source, which is photo books. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be books of photos. It could be books written by the photographer, or it can be books written about the photographer. In comparison with the other two methods that we've talked about, I feel that reading photo books could be less readily digestible, in a sense that the work that you see is going to be more detached, both in terms of time and context. However, this is my most preferred way of learning about photography, and whenever I happen to come across a photo book or a photographer's work who I really enjoy reading, I then put it together as a video and share it with you guys. If you feel that you want to really expand your knowledge base in terms of photographers and their work, check out these videos I've linked in the description cards above. Apart from actually undergoing plastic surgery, there are a couple of other ways that you could actually grow thicker skin. And one of that, which is very important, is to be actually proud of what you're doing. The nature of street photography often involves capturing people without their consent in public areas. It goes without saying that it probably would not be the most comfortable experience for both you and the people being photographed. That could be a substantial reason as to why you might not feel like going out to shoot at a particular time at a particular spot. It's completely normal to feel this way. It is in fact a shared concern that street photographers have, except that it does not have to be the case. In this video up here, I talked in greater detail as to how you can potentially overcome your fear in doing street photography, but in a nutshell, I think one of the main reasons as to why you feel insecure on streets is because you don't actually believe in what you're doing. So the second someone gives you a weird stare, or that someone asks you to get out of their way, or someone makes fun of you on streets, you then immediately back off and feel bad about yourself. That obviously stops you from getting the shot that you really want, or waiting for that perfect moment where the shot will be much better than what you got away with. It's going to show in your work how assertive you are when you're on streets and how comfortable you are generally in your skin when you're navigating a scene. From my own experience, as you can see in some of my point of view videos, one of the pluses of being confident happens when someone asks you about what you do. So if you are able to present yourself nicely to that person, to the very least, it's going to give you a good conversation and good vibes. And sometimes it also leads to some of the best portraits that I've taken on streets, where I've actually told the person what I'm doing and what I'm looking for. With this kind of situation, you never know. So it's going to take you a long way by being confident and actually believing in street photography. Next up, I would definitely advise that you know your community and specifically understand how you relate to that community. Now, in my opinion, the best street photography ever done is a form of social documentary. It contains an interpretation of the artist's view of that community rather than just being a random collection of snapshots that happen to be taken because of chance. One of the most fascinating things about street photography is that there are so many different versions of the same place. Let's take New York as an example in the mid-60s. Now this is William Klein, typical with his motion blur. This is Robert Frank, photographing the city from a mainly post-war point of view. Vivian Mayer doubling in on spectacles on streets, and Diane Arbus digging out the not-so-pretty segments of life in New York. These are shot at the same place at the same time period, but they show very contrasting sides because they came from very contrasting perspectives. Whatever that difference might be, the reason why these photographers each left their mark in the history of the art of photography is because they are known for a very particular way in which they saw the city. So apparently you've gotta know the city that you are photographing in well. But more so to the point, I think it's even more important that you regularly reflect on how you relate with the people in the city and the culture and the things and the tiny subtleties that you see around in your daily life. Now, what I meant by breathing photography is that essentially, photography has to be an integral part of your life. It has to be becoming your lifestyle. Now, the reason why sometimes the street photography halts, your sessions might not feel as rewarding, and you might not have got that many good shots as you might have wished otherwise, is probably because you're not seeing properly. You're not seeing as your camera sees. There are many reasons as to why this can happen. You're probably not going to the right places for the type of photos that you want to take. You're not going at the right time. These things sound really trivial, but it's always going to be the small things that you take care of that's going to make a huge difference. All of this has to do with your ability to notice things on scene and your ability to understand human behavior. If you are a street photographer who likes playing with light and shadow, then you've got to notice when is the shadow hitting at what angle, because that is going to be a central part of your compositions. Or say if you want to make candid photos of strangers on a busy street, then you probably need to be able to predict where that person is gonna go based on what you see them do. So you have a better chance of nailing your focus and having them in the right part of the frame. I used to believe in this really romantic notion that I just need to be there and be present with my camera. If I'm lucky, I will be able to get the shot. But over the years, I've definitely learned that street photography is not really a matter of moments. Rather, it's a matter of a lifetime in a sense that you've got to learn how to see. So what that looks like in your everyday life is that you're constantly looking at things, even when you don't have your camera with you or that you do not intend to do any photography. You should still be at the lookout for potential photo spots, and where necessary, if you do actually find something that's worth capturing and worth revisiting, then you probably should make visual notes on your phone or with any portable device just to make a note to yourself that, oh, that is a potential spot that I could return to one day, because if the conditions are right, I will be able to get a good photo out of that. This notion of capturing moments on streets sounds liberating, when in fact, if you actually want to get good at street photography, it's going to be an accumulation of effort put in on a day-to-day basis, which then prepares you to be in the position to capture that moment when it happens. You probably already know that you should simplify your gear. So the real question is, how simple is simple? Of course, there's no standard number as to how many pieces of gear that you're allowed to keep. That's absolutely ridiculous. But I do think that everyone has a limit as to how many pieces of gear they're able to really know well at the same time. For me, I'm happy with keeping 2 camera bodies and 3 lenses. That's pretty much all that I use for street photography. I have one digital body being the 5D Mark IV and another film body being the Minolta Maxim 5000. For both of these cameras, I have a nifty 50 to go with each of them, and for the DSLR in addition, I have a 24mm prime that I use on a regular basis. Over the years, I came to learn that whatever gear I add to the collection, it's not as meaningful to know a little bit about every single piece of gear versus knowing everything about a very few pieces of gear. Knowing 10% of 9 different pieces of glass is different from knowing 90% of one piece of glass. The reason for this is because when something comes up in the street, what you know about the other pieces of gear in your collection would not help you in that situation. You're only going to have a chance to capture that scene on the very lens or the very piece of gear that you have with you. It's really going to pay off in the long run if you just resist the urge to, try out the latest and the greatest and just really stick to that one piece of gear that has proven itself that it's gonna serve you right in any situation, really. And that's going to up your chance, apparently, as a street photographer to capture the scene as you want in any particular day. This doesn't really just apply to photography. It applies to any creative career and really life in general. We often live under the delusion that this is what progress looks like. So, with every minute that you put into photography, you're gonna get better by the minute. And that's simply just not the case. In reality, growth happens in a zigzag line. So it's gonna zigzag upwards, but there are going to be periods of stagnation where you don't seem to be growing as much. And on the other hand, you're gonna experience moments of epiphany where you all of a sudden thought of something new and achieve a breakthrough in your photography. Had I known about this reality way earlier, I wouldn't have felt frustrated for not growing and the secondary frustration for feeling frustrated. That is not to say that you don't have to work at your street photography at a regular interval. As we said, training your vision so that you could see like how your camera sees has to happen on a day-to-day basis. However, if you think about it, the fact that you took notice of something on the street today, it's not going to immediately translate into results tomorrow. So that perfectly demonstrates the reality of growth. So if you feel that you are in a situation where you're not really sure what you should improve in terms of your street photography, stay put and keep at it, because the thing is, you don't really know when the next light bulb moment is going to come around for you. And in order for you to actually capture that light bulb moment, you have to be ready when it happens. In my opinion, getting better at street photography really is a game of temperament more so than of intellect or skill level. That's why the tips that I included in this video are mostly about mindset and perspective, because that is what I genuinely think are the most important breakthrough moments in my photography career. Coming up is a video on Saul Leiter and his work. If that's what you're into, stay tuned for that. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!